All over the world from recorded history, there are stories of people being turned to stone. Whether it's Medusa from ancient Greek mythology, Lot's wife turning to a pillar of salt from the Bible, to more modern stories like a CIA document about aliens turning soldiers to stone with a bright light, and more. Join me as we explore various myths, legends, and stories of people being turned to stone. Chapter 1. Medusa. Medusa is one of the oldest and most iconic figures in ancient Greek mythology, her story dating back over 2,500 years. She was one of 3 Gorgons and the only mortal among them. Her legend has haunted Western imagination since at least 8th century BCE, first appearing in Hesiod's Theogony and later expanded upon by authors like Ovid and Apollodorus. The most well-known versions of the myth tells us that Medusa was once a beautiful maiden, a priestess of Athena's temple. After being violated by Poseidon within the sacred space, she was cursed by Athena. Her once lovely hair turned into serpents, and her gaze turned lethal. Anyone who looked directly into her eyes would be turned to stone. Eventually, the hero Perseus was tasked with slaying her. With the help of divine tools, including a mirrored shield from Athena, he avoided her gaze and decapitated her. Even in death, her severed head retained its powers, and Perseus used it to petrify enemies like King Polydectes and the sea monster Cetus. But what if the myth of Medusa isn't purely symbolic? Could her gaze have represented something more literal, an energy-filled, a light weapon, or a consciousness-based technology capable of rendering living matter inert? Was she a victim, a guardian, or the misunderstood wielder of a stasis device lost to time? And here's something curious. How could anyone possibly know what Medusa looked like if anyone who saw her was turned to stone? It raises the question, was it truly her gaze, or was it something else, something she possessed? A ring, an amulet, a tiara, or some other kind of ancient device that emitted this effect. After Perseus beheaded her, he carried her severed head and continued to use it as a weapon. She was no longer alive, yet the power remained. This wasn't a curse tied to consciousness or emotion. It was an effect embedded in the physical, perhaps technological aspect of her head. This suggests it wasn't Medusa herself, but something in, on, or around her that triggered this petrification. A relic, a mechanism, a forgotten artifact from a time before time. Chapter 2. Lot's wife. One of the most enigmatic moments in biblical history occurs in the story of Lot's wife, a tale that has echoed through time for thousands of years. In the book of Genesis, as Sodom and Gomorrah face divine destruction, Lot's family is told to flee without looking back, but Lot's wife does. And in that moment, she is turned into a pillar of salt. The mainstream reading sees this as punishment for disobedience. But what if there's more to the story? Was she caught in a blast of light so intense it crystallized her where she stood? And here's the real question. Did she turn to salt instead of stone because she was too far from the epicenter, only caught in a glancing hit from whatever light-based force consumed the cities? The biblical description doesn't dwell on flame or heat, but instead speaks of fire and brimstone falling from the sky, language that might describe, in ancient terms, a powerful beam or energy weapon. Did Sodom and Gomorrah burn? Or did they flash out of existence under a technology so advanced it was mistaken for divine wrath? Lot's wife becomes more than a cautionary tale. She may represent the first recorded instance of partial petrification, a failed stasis event, frozen not in stone, but in salt. Chapter 3. The UFO Petrification Case, CIA document. This isn't ancient myth, it's a modern mystery pulled from a declassified CIA document. According to the report, Soviet soldiers encountered a low-flying, disc-shaped object during a training exercise. They fired on it. The craft crashed, and what followed was anything but ordinary. From the wreckage emerged 5 humanoid beings. Witnesses claimed the entities fused together in a single radiant sphere, glowing, pulsing, alive with light. Then, without warning, it released a brilliant flash. When the light faded, 23 soldiers were gone, turned to stone, frozen in the moment. Only 2 survivors remained. The petrified bodies were allegedly transported to a research facility and examined. The conclusion? Their flesh, bone, and blood had become solid mineral. Not burned, not vaporized, but transformed. Not killed, converted. What kind of technology or consciousness can do that? Was it a defense mechanism, a stasis field, or something else entirely? The implications are staggering. Could this have been a defensive stasis technology, something designed not to kill but to preserve or neutralize through energetic suspension? A field or pulse that rewrites the molecular structure of a living being, freezing it in time? An alien species doesn't need missiles. It doesn't separate thought from action. What we call a weapon might simply be the result of a mind entering a particular state, a form of focused resonance. Imagine a being, or even a group of them, merging consciousness in a moment of intention, a pulse of directed will. The light, then, may be more than just photons. It may be the carrier of something far stranger, a kind of conscious code. And the optic nerve? It's not just a channel for vision. It's a direct extension of the brain. Light enters the eye, but it's interpreted in the mind. And in that space, it becomes something else. Could this petrifying effect be tied not to the physical light, but to the act of perception itself? Seeing may be a kind of entanglement, a silent agreement between observer and phenomenon. When the soldiers looked at that sphere, did they do more than observe? Did they bind themselves to it? Those who survived were in the shadows, not just physically but perceptually. They didn't interface. They weren't entangled. And that might be the key. The light wasn't ordinary. It wasn't just illumination. It was a transmission, a conscious signal that restructured whatever it engaged with. This ties us back to Medusa. Her power only activated when someone looked at her. The soldiers who were petrified had to see the sphere. Lot's wife had to look back. In all these stories, perception itself is the trigger. It's not the light alone, but the act of engaging with it, of witnessing the impossible. The weapon isn't fired, it's received. It's unlocked by vision, by consciousness. In that sense, the stone effect isn't imposed, it's accepted, even if unknowingly. The gaze becomes the handshake, the interface. Maybe these events are not isolated incidents. Maybe they're echoes of a shared technology or a truth so old it's been buried in every culture's mythology. One that tells us, be careful what you see because it just might see you back. Chapter 4. The Benevolent Stasis Hypothesis. What if turning to stone was never meant to be a curse, but a safeguard? A tool not of destruction, but of preservation. Picture a civilization with technology so advanced it could pause a living being mid-breath, holding them perfectly still for centuries. Not dead, not gone, just waiting. This is the essence of the benevolent stasis hypothesis. That what we interpret as petrification might actually be a kind of suspended animation, a cryosleep of stone, a technology that freezes not just the body, but time itself for the individual. In myth after myth, it's the gaze, the light, or the act of looking that triggers the transformation. Maybe these aren't punishments from angry gods, but failed preservation events. Maybe these beings were meant to be reawakened, but something went wrong. The mechanism was forgotten. The knowledge was lost. And so they remain statues, their stories passed down as warnings, when they were never meant to be. If such technology existed, capable of preserving life indefinitely, what else could it have been used for? Interstellar voyages? Surviving cataclysms? Protecting bloodlines? Histories? Or secrets? The implications shift everything. Perhaps stone is not the end. Perhaps it's a doorway we no longer know how to open. Chapter 5. Civilization Reset via Petrification. What if entire civilizations weren't destroyed, but paused, frozen not by ice or war, but by something far stranger? The idea that humans have been reset through petrification isn't just a fringe theory. It's a thread that runs quietly beneath many ancient stories. We often hear of global cataclysms, floods and fires raining from the sky, but what if the real mechanism of these resets was stasis technology? The kind that could suspend entire populations, freezing them in place with precision. Not mass extinction, but mass preservation, waiting for a signal that never came. Some speculate that this kind of stasis was used during prior epochs, possibly connected to civilizations like Tartaria, whose architectural and technological anomalies have puzzled researchers for years. Tied into theories of the so-called mud flood, it suggests that many of the statues, ruins, or even strange rock formations we see today could be the remnants of a world that was halted mid-step. Not destroyed, just forgotten. A civilization still embedded in stone, not by myth, but by a technology we no longer understand. Chapter 6. Giant Petrified Trees, Flat-Top Mountains. Across the world, towering geological formations rise from the earth. But what if some of these aren't mountains at all? What if they're the remnants of something much older, something once alive? The theory of giant petrified trees suggests what we call flat-top mountains may actually be the stumps of ancient, impossible trees, life forms that defy modern understanding. Take Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Its perfect vertical striations, flat top and circular base make it look more like a tree stump than a volcanic extrusion. Local Native American legend says it was a sacred site where the ground rose up to protect children from a great bear. But maybe the ground didn't rise. Maybe the tree fell. Mount Roraima in Venezuela is another. Often shrouded in clouds, it feels like a relic from another time, a tabletop world disconnected from ours. In myths from the Piman people, it's known as the stump of the tree that once held all the fruits of the earth. When it was felled, paradise was lost. Cerro Atana, also in Venezuela, rises dramatically from the jungle. It has long been considered sacred by the Payara people. In the mythology, Cerro Atana was once the tree of life. Its branches stretched to the heavens and its roots reached deep into the underworld. It bore all the fruits that sustained the world. But when the tree was cut down by ancient beings, the balance was lost, and the world as we knew it changed. What remains is the petrified stump, silent, immense, and sacred. Like Devil's Tower and Mount Roraima, Cerro Atana has the look and feel of something that was once alive, something vast, something that may have been frozen, not decayed, by an effect we no longer understand. A global stasis, a petrification of a living system far beyond the human scale. What if these aren't just myths or geological quirks, but remnants of an ancient biosphere, a world before this one, forested by titanic organisms, turned to stone not by time, but by technology. A stasis effect on a planetary scale. The United States is home to even more compelling examples. At Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona, entire forests have been turned to stone. Trees that appear to have fallen and fossilized in place, their structure preserved down to the grain. While the official explanation attributes this to mineralization over millions of years, there are those who believe it may have occurred all at once, in a single moment of energetic suspension. Then there's Mount St. Helens, where following the volcanic eruption in 1980, forests were buried and fossilized at a startling rate. Trees submerged in Spirit Lake began the process of petrification in just decades, not millennia. It's become an important case study for how fast petrification can really happen when the conditions are right. Further across the globe, Jugurtha Tableland in Tunisia stands as another monumental formation with flat, abrupt cliffs. Some local legends consider it a place of refuge in great battles, but to the curious eye, its shape mirrors that of a severed trunk. Was it once rooted in something more? Did ancient beings carve it from stone, or was it once alive and turned to stone by some immense force? Then there's Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock in Australia, a sacred site to the Enengu people. They tell stories of ancestral beings who shaped the land, fighting great battles and leaving behind physical marks. The rock itself rises from the desert like a monument to something ancient, something fossilized. Not merely sacred because of its age, but perhaps because it's a memory in stone, the last remnant of a world we no longer understand. These are just a few examples. There are many, many more. Chapter 7: Mud Fossil University and the Stone Beings Theory. If there's one voice that has stirred thousands to look at the ground beneath their feet with new eyes, it's Roger Spurr, the man behind Mud Fossil University. On his YouTube channel, Roger shares a radical theory that many of the massive stone formations we see across the world, mountains, cliffs, and boulders, are not just geological accidents, but the remains of giant beings that once roamed the earth. According to Roger, these aren't just fossils in the traditional sense, they're mud fossils, biological organisms that have been preserved in stone through mineral replacement. He points to what appear to be veins, capillaries, skin textures, and even worn-down teeth embedded in rocks. He's shown boulders that he say are toes, knuckles, and even entire organs, all preserved by what he claims is a unique natural petrification process, though the scale and suddenness of some cases hint at forces we may not fully understand. One of his most striking claims is that the ancient texts weren't exaggerating. When they spoke of giants, titans, and beings carved from stone, they may have been describing literal truths, not just symbolic mythology. He often says, it's not a theory if it's visible. And for those willing to take a second look, some of these formations really do carry eerie anatomical familiarity. Spurr suggests that these beings may have been turned to stone suddenly in some kind of cataclysmic event, whether through a natural process or perhaps a conscious technology act. The result is the same. Enormous bodies scattered across the earth, hiding in plain sight. Whether you agree or not, Mud Fossil University challenges us to reconsider what we think we know about the earth beneath us. And in a world full of stone, statues, and forgotten myths, maybe, just maybe, some of the stone was once alive. Chapter 8: Dr. Stone, a modern echo of the petrification theory. Sometimes ancient ideas resurface in the most unexpected places, like anime. Dr. Stone, created by Richiro Inagaki and illustrated by Byochi, is a Japanese anime and manga series that offers a modern science fiction version of our core theory: the entire world turned to stone by an unknown force of light. In the story, a strange green light suddenly engulfs the earth, petrifying every human being in an instant. Civilization halts. Thousands of years pass. Nature reclaims the cities. Humanity becomes statues. And then, one by one, a few people begin to break free, including the show's main character, Senku. What makes Dr. Stone so fascinating is that it doesn't rely on magic or fantasy. It's rooted in science. Senku, a teenage genius, dedicates himself to understanding the cause of the petrification event and uses chemistry, biology, and physics to restore others. The show explores themes of preservation, technological rebirth, and civilization reset, not unlike the very real theories we've been exploring here. And the cause of the petrification? A mysterious energy pulse sent by an unknown force or intelligence that encodes itself into light and locks every human in a frozen state. Exactly the kind of direct consciousness effect or stasis technology we've seen in our myths. What Dr. Stone shows us is this: The idea of light-based petrification is no longer just ancient, it's becoming mainstream again, quietly returning to the culture through fiction, reframed as science, and maybe, just maybe, remembered. Chapter 9. The Science Behind Petrification. Let's pull back for a moment and look at the actual science behind how something turns to stone. In nature, petrification is a slow geological process. When an organism, often wood or bone, is buried under sediment and deprived of oxygen, groundwater rich in minerals like silica begin to seep in. Over thousands or even millions of years, the organic material is gradually replaced with those minerals, cell by cell, until the structure is preserved in stone. This is what we see in places like the Petrified Forest in Arizona. It's called permineralization, and it's astonishingly detailed. But here's the catch. That kind of petrification takes time, lots of it. So what about the stories where people or objects are turned to stone in a flash, instantly, violently, or even mercifully? Some speculative theories suggest that petrification could happen through other means, far faster than conventional science allows. One idea is that a powerful enough force could halt the vibration of atoms, effectively freezing matter in place. This would be less about replacing material and more about stopping time at an atomic level. A person wouldn't decay or age, they'd be trapped in a moment. Another possibility is that a field or signal could rearrange atomic structures entirely, swapping out key molecular bonds or transmuting organic elements into crystalline forms. In this view, petrification isn't just a pause, it's a transformation, guided by resonance, energy, or intent. Other theories involve extreme compression, resonant frequencies, or even plasma events, high-energy conditions that could rapidly crystallize organic material like a supercharged version of fossilization. If directed by intelligence, this might explain the uniform, almost artistic qualities seen in many petrified statues and legends. While mainstream science has no evidence of such mechanisms, the idea of petrification as preservation through technology or energetic force fits perfectly within the mythologies we've been exploring. Let's take a step deeper. Maybe the reason modern science can't fully explain these stories is because it's missing a fundamental layer, consciousness itself. What if consciousness isn't just a product of the brain, but the actual medium through which reality manifests? Then the most advanced technology wouldn't rely on hardware or chemicals. It would operate through mind state, intention, resonance. The beings in the UFO story didn't fire a weapon, they entered a state of alignment. They merged their awareness, amplified their unified will, and then projected it through an energetic construct, the radiant sphere of light. The soldiers weren't simply struck by something, they engaged with it, looked at it, entangled with it. And that act of conscious observation, of connection, was what sealed their fate. If consciousness is the substrate of reality, then energy, matter, and even time are malleable. Petrification wouldn't be a side effect of light. It would be the result of a conscious waveform collapsing the form of the observer into its own pattern. And maybe that's why so many of these stories revolve around sight, the gaze, the glance, the moment of visual contact. You don't get turned to stone unless you interface with it. In this sense, petrification isn't a punishment, it's a handshake between two frequencies. A transfer, a merging, a stasis, accepted. So many of these stories end not with death, but with pause, with forms locked in time, as if waiting for something to return. Maybe we haven't uncovered the truth yet because it isn't buried. It's frozen, hidden in plain sight all around us, still watching, still waiting.